Hello, thank you for watching today's episode of Wicked Binge, in which we're taking the cast of Smiling Friends and ranking them from worst to best. This is the Smiling Friends tier list, and while there aren't really any characters who are bad from a writing standpoint, there are some who've left an intentionally negative impact with their limited appearances, and such characters make up the D tier. And taking the bottom spot has to be the one and only Jared Fogle, the subway guy. And sure, this was kind of a tasteless joke on the boss's part, but ignoring the fact that this cameo was just Gleb cosplaying, and doing it concerningly well, by the way. We have to mention him here for the sole reason that this scene implies that Jared Fogle does indeed exist in the Smiling Friends universe. Now, while she isn't anywhere near as reprehensible, our next D-tier candidate is Pim's sister, Amy. Now, to her credit, or at least not to her discredit, we don't know much about Amy. All we know is that Pim genuinely loves Amy, despite their frequent bickering, and truly believes the feeling is mutual, whereas Amy tells Pim point blank in front of friends, partner, and family that she genuinely hates him. While it is possible that Pim did something to warrant this, we highly doubt it from what we've seen, but sadly, regardless of any blank space in her character, Amy doesn't have any redeeming qualities to balance out her seemingly meaningless hatred of the show's sweetest character. And frankly, Pim hate will not be tolerated on this channel. The next spot goes to Mr. Frog's former producer, Rex.
And action.
He started out as Mr. Frog's boss, then became Mr. Frog's ex-boss, and finally ended up as one of Mr. Frog's many victims. While eating a TMZ reporter who had nothing to do with his show proved detrimental to his reputation, eating his less than likable boss actually thrust him back into the limelight. And it's not hard to see why. Rex is one of those producers who's so concerned with not offending his audience that he'll ignore everything the people actually want to see.
What did I tell you? The audience is gonna hate that. No more spitting.
And even threaten his workers to conform. This is the guy who keeps insisting every Disney movie needs to be remade in live action, basically. In the meantime, he'll blame just about everyone but himself for its failure, which is extreme narcissism. Maybe he didn't deserve to be eaten alive, but we also can't say that we feel too bad for the guy. There's not really any sympathy, just a little bit of pity. And speaking of Mr. Frog's victims, next is Mr. Bug. His sole purpose is to be gobbled up by Mr. Frog in the most legendary 7 seconds of TV to ever hit the air. While we commend his hard work, we don't commend him taking the credit for the show's success after Mr. Frog is kicked off. You might be a fly, but remember, you'd still be on the ground without Mr. Frog. And let's give a quick mention to Armzo, the duply armed grocery store stock boy who argued with Alan for seemingly no reason. Retail workers are absolute champions for the stuff that they deal with, but that doesn't mean they're always in the right.
Wait, hold on, man. I'm in the middle of something here.
And we see an example of that with Armzo. Poor Alan is on the wrong end of this psych ward escapee's short temper. He's an unpleasant, unhelpful guy, but hopefully he at least gets some workers' comp for getting crushed by all that canned ink. And finally, to close out our bottom tier, we have Jeremy. During Charlie's brief stay in hell, Jeremy was his only form of hellish entertainment, by which we mean he solely existed to annoy the hell out of Charlie, or annoy the hell into him, I guess. Either way, when a character is literally made to be annoying, it's hard to hate them, but it's kinda hard to like them either, especially when he ignores Charlie's warning to stop jump scaring him. I mean, sorry guy, you asked for that punch. But let's move on to our next section. Characters who at least outweigh their bad traits with good ones. This is the C tier, and kicking things off, we have more of Pim's family, starting with Pim's mom. And yeah, they haven't given her a name yet, but she's certainly Pim's mom. That much is for sure. She also seems to enjoy drinking smoothly animated wine, which is a character trait. Slightly more existent is Pim's one-time love interest, Jennifer. Thanks to Pim's procrastination in regards to getting glasses, he mistakes Jennifer for Shrimp's ex-girlfriend, Shrimpina. This explains why he feels bad for falling in love with her rather quickly, and why he ends up inadvertently setting the two up at the end of the episode. As for Jennifer, despite her small role, she's cute, nice, and she's into nerdy shut-ins. Next up, we have Zoe. She appears in the Halloween and Christmas episodes, briefly in each, and is apparently Charlie's girlfriend. Or was, rather. According to Zach Hadel, who voices Charlie, Gleb, and like half the rest of the cast, she was involved in a bulldozer accident after the end of season 1. We're not sure if this is canon or not, but it is oddly specific. Just one more love interest for now. Next up is Marge Simpson. Oh, you haven't heard of Marge Simpson? Yeah, most people haven't. She's a niche character. All you need to know is that she's the loving wife of Glep, and she seems to be a loving spouse. Next up is a dual entry, William and Wendy Worm. They fulfill the role of bickering news co-anchors who provide exposition alongside a bit of allegedly friendly banter.
Yes, and I'm Wendy Worm.
Yes, we know.
It turns out that they're also secretly rigging the elections by manipulating the mass media. They're perfectly fine characters, but in a world with so many wild and wacky faces, we have to place them just a bit lower, especially since there's not a lot of room for them to shine in a show like Smiling Friends. After all, it is very difficult to make politics something to smile about. But I guess at least it sort of worked for President Jimble, a lamb-loving vice president who was thrusted into his new role after his superior's untimely death. Aside from his concerning addiction to lamb, Jimble is a messy, incompetent guy who regularly nukes civilizations and allies himself with fascist dictators by total accident. He's one of those characters who has a hard time walking the fine line of hilariously incompetent and annoyingly incompetent. But he does learn to accept himself by the end of the episode, and furthermore, to accept the fact that he should not be president. And that's good for him, but for the love of God, someone please get him some napkins. Next, we have a quick mention of Charlie's former friend, Jumbo. Charlie met Jumbo at Mr. Boss's wedding, and the two hit it off pretty quickly. So quick, in fact, that he somehow deciphered what he was saying in his legendary story. He even bought a $600 knife from a guy, which later on turned out to be a fake plastic one. His deception of Charlie loses him a lot of points, as anyone who's been scammed can surely agree with, but at least it made for some funny jokes, if nothing else.
It's a gag knife.
Oh my god, I paid $600 for that, dude.
Oh,
That said, to think he was even considered a candidate to be the fifth smiling friend is absurd. You're not Smormu, and you'll never be Smormu. He's irreplaceable. Oh, and also, he touched himself at the boss's wedding, so. Speaking of that wedding, our last spot in the C tier has to go to the boss's now ex-wife, Brittany. When something sets the smiling friends off about their boss's new lover, they do some research and discover that Brittany is the literal daughter of Satan and is attempting to suck away the boss's life essence.
Oh no, stop! You're embarrassing me! Oh, stop!
Taking his company over from behind the scenes like a puppeteer. In short, she's trying to get the smiling friends to be owned by the devil. This might actually provide an explanation of why the boss went insane in the Gwimbly episode. So despite her not being a likable character in the least, her intimidating design and her expansion on Mr. Boss's lore definitely gives her just enough points to be at the top of our C tier. And as evil as she was, the fact that she straight up offed herself upon being called out makes us feel just a little bit of pity, if nothing else. But let's move on to the more memorable supporting characters. And there are plenty. This is the B tier. And we're kicking things off in this section with the boss's son, Boss Baby. He's had minimal screen time so far, only appearing in the very first episode to be breastfed by his father. He's a cute little guy, or, well, he's a little guy at least, and we can't help but find it endearing that he has such a wholesome relationship with the boss, even if it is a really, really weird one. And speaking of weird relationships, are we not going to talk about how Boss Baby looks like Pim and Charlie in a blender? Like, did Charlie hook up with the boss? Not only is there this scene, but in the aforementioned Brittany episode, Charlie apparently believes he can provide a kiss of true love to the boss. So place your bets in the comments. And staying on the subject of fathers for now, we have Stephen Pimling, aka Pim's dad. While his first impression in episode 1 isn't the best, with him being shown to shout at his family at the slightest inconvenience, he's later shown via a flashback to be protective of his son. When Pim wants to go to the Enchanted Forest, his father warns him against it, saying it's too dangerous to go until he's older. And as we see later on, thanks to a certain hobbit creature, Stephen had the right idea. Plus, he's cosplaying Hank Hill, and who doesn't love Hank Hill? It is very weird that he kisses his son on the mouth though. And closing out Pim's immediate family, we have his cousin, Graham Nelly. When it comes to the Pimling family, we may actually know the least about him. But what we do know is legendary, and that's that he's a damn whiz with the skateboard. It's hard to tell if this fingerboard enthusiast is a teenager or in his 30s, but either way, it's nice that he has an older cousin who cares about him and supports his hobbies. But while he's not a direct family member, Amy's current partner, Alpha, might as well be, with how nice of a guy he is. Unlike Amy, Alpha is relatively quiet despite being absolutely jacked. He's also a sensitive soul, and being exposed to a lot of conflict makes him sick to his stomach.
I'm sorry. I ruined it.
I'm sorry.
Essentially the essence of a true chat. In other words, you're just too good for her, Alpha. For everyone who's still there, the TV guy has something to tell you. Come on, you all know what it is. He'd like to offer you some gratitude for watching so far. You could even say it with him. Could there be a more fitting side character to kick off the entire series? And every pilot episode needs an antagonist, so let's talk about the Bliblies. These little magenta creatures will steal paper clips, staples, pieces of cheese, and whatever else they can get their grubby little appendages on. What's worse is that if you find them, they'll lure you into a false sense of sympathy and security, only to shank you when you least expect it. They also know both what crucifixion is and how to do it. And all that is to say, if you even suspect you have some of them, you better call Desmond. Next, we have the third episode's main client, Shrimp. Being dumped by his girlfriend Shrimpina sends Shrimp into depression, and Charlie and Pim try everything they can do to cheer him up. While Charlie tries to encourage Shrimp to move on and work on himself, Pim works on setting up Shrimpina on a surprise date with him so he can win her back over. We respect Shrimp's willingness to work on himself, but even more so, we have to respect loyalty to his girl. He didn't want just any girl, he wanted Shrimpina. And while he didn't get her back in the end, he did get Jennifer, someone who accepted him for who he is. Perhaps the series' greatest mystery so far, aside from the whole boss sex Charlie theory. Wall Guy from the very first episode is up next. For some odd reason, this squatter wants to look at something on his computer so horrific that he can only do it inside of the Smiling Friends building's walls.
Yeah, not really your business though, is it?
While he's pretty rude, the sheer absurdity of the situation is hilarious, and he's also voiced by Mike from Stranger Things, which doesn't tell us anything about his character, but it's kinda cool. Nearing the end of our B tier is the owner of Salty's, Simon S. Salty. It's a shame we only got to see him after he'd already died. Like any fast food joint, Salty's was notoriously unhealthy, until the health department forced it to not be unhealthy anymore. This made its charismatic namesake the victim of literally 7 murders, each for a different reason related to the guy just trying to run his restaurant. And to close out the B tier, let's do a quick lightning round for Salty's mascots. First is Crazy Cup, a man with a truly unfortunate stomach condition that makes taking off and putting on his costume a living hell. Then there's Ketchup, who greets the customers and honestly does the least convincing job of defending himself. He's outdone by Salt and Pepper, whose motives for both murder and seemingly for existing in general is to kiss in the supply closet, or literally wherever they can. Mustard gets a high ranking just for the fact that she's a condiment packet who managed to seduce the restaurant's owner, which will never not be funny. And finally, the best of these murderers have to be the Fun Twins for their wonderful storytelling talents, even if they have nothing to do with the murder itself. Honestly, that just convinces me that they had the most brutal methods of all. Oh, and we also can't forget about Grease, one of the only mascots who was actually honest and didn't kill Salty. This is especially noteworthy when you think about the fact that Salty's healthier menu items would probably affect the literal embodiment of grease more than anyone else. What a truly merciful soul. Oh, and fun fact, apparently Grease was originally going to be voiced by Kristijan as a cameo appearance, but it didn't work out, which was a major bullet dodged. And rounding out the B tier is the Sentry Egg, who was chained up in the basement by Salty after his menu item didn't sell well.
Secret room!
Surprisingly, he also wasn't one of the murderers, despite having by far the most valid reason for it if he did. But he did ultimately help solve the case with his ridiculously huge amount of security footage, making him a hero despite his circumstances. Now, if you aren't already smiling, worry not, because we've reached the A tier. And this is where we start getting into the most memorable characters in the show. First up, we have the character Doug. While we expected the episode with the dude called Professor Psychotic to be a wacky adventure about a mad scientist's quest to conquer the world, we aren't upset with what we got, which was a story of 2 arguing brothers learning to respect and accept each other. Despite being reasonably upset with his brother's squatting and his inconsideration for his housemate, Doug still cares deeply for him and wants the best for him. Unfortunately, his younger brother, Professor Psychotic, is less selfless. When he's called out for his inconsiderate behavior at their house, which is fully paid for by Doug, mind you, he resorts to insulting him and insinuating that he failed their deceased mother by working so much. While he's a huge jerk, he's pretty entertaining.
Hello, I am Professor Psychotic. I'm making an egg with my DNA in my evil laboratory.
and thanks to his new creation of Eggborn Life, ended up mending the broken bonds between the two of them in an unexpected way. If you thought Brittany was terrifying, let's not forget about the Forest Demon. In a show as absurd and hilarious as Smiling Friends, a Halloween special monster could have gone one of two ways, either hilarious or absolutely terrifying. Impressively, he manages to be both. His chasing of Pym is genuinely terrifying and might have you worried for the little guy's safety, but when he's called out for his use of blackface, he meets justice in a pretty well-deserved way, even if it is for the wrong reason. The Forest Demon's existence is the whole reason that the party bro / rotoscope guy is this high on the list. Sure, in episode 1, he made a pretty bad first impression. We'll say it again, but Pym hate is not tolerated on our channel, especially if this Mike Ehrmantraut lookalike is gonna call him old.
Well, I mean, I'm not that old.
But that being said, he was more than willing to call out the demon for what he thought was blackface, and in the process, he ended up opening the door to his defeat. The guy saved Pym's life, and that's enough to give him a pretty high spot. He may be a jerk, but he's no monster. And continuing the trend of jerks is our next character, James. Appearing in the legendary Gwimbly episode, he's the main antagonist of its B-plot, abusing the Smiling Friends policy of making all of its clients smile no matter what to turn Charlie into his heavily mistreated manservant. It's a fun B-plot, especially given how purely unlikable James is, and you even feel a bit sorry for him in the post-credit scene, where he's reflecting on his misdeeds while pondering a framed photo of Charlie, which he has for some reason. But with that said, they really should have some sort of screening for this stuff. And quite possibly the weirdest reason for being eternally condemned we've ever seen. Next is Charlie's grandma. That reason? She said damn in 1958 after seeing her husband being shot by a burglar. Thankfully, she seems to be having a decent enough time, just chilling out in her rocking chair and sucking on a lollipop. And I mean, like, she's sucking that lollipop, man. I'm not judging, but I don't think that cursing is her only sin. Sticking to hell for another moment, let's talk about Satan. While he's not as terrifying as, and just barely more evil than, the Forest Demon, Smiling Friend's answer to Satan is still a scumbag who's willing to break his word for the sake of fulfilling his sadistic desires. That said, there's something to be admired about the fact that the literal ruler of hell itself is still relatively polite to service workers.
Okay, thank you, sir.
From one side of the afterlife to the other, next is Gilbert Gottfried. Since he's sadly no longer with us, we can only hope that Gilbert Gottfried can rest in peace knowing that his final role in our mortal realm was God himself, who saved Charlie from the clutches of the devil and gave him another chance at life. It would be impressive enough for a character to just do that, but to be voiced by Gilbert Gottfried on top of that, we're being generous to the other characters by even placing him this low. It's time to talk about the Smiling Friends' very first on-screen client, Desmond. When we first meet Desmond, he's at a pretty low point. Okay, that's a serious understatement. He literally holds a pistol to his head for 90% of the time. The Smiling Friends have their work cut out for them, but thankfully, despite Pym's unfortunate failure to give him hope in life, Desmond finds his purpose in life by becoming a Blibbly exterminator, saving countless precious pieces of cheese in the process. There have been a lot of incredible cameos in the series so far, but arguably the funniest was Daniel the Demon Slayer, played in live action and full cosplay by the Nostalgia Critic. Having an entire 8-minute advertisement in your channel has to lose you some points, sure, like there can't be that much to say about Dollar Shave Club.
Sorry, let me just skip ahead of that.
Thank you.
Nonetheless, using your platform to help people save their bosses from being enslaved to demons for eternity is more than enough to make up for that. But let's talk about some iconic bad guys, starting with the Frowning Friends, Grim and Gnarly. The natural enemy of the Smiling Friends, the Frowning Friends, work to make sure people are as cynical and nihilistic as they can be. It turns out that their business model is a sham, despite their belief that the world isn't worth living in. They freak out when their lives are actively threatened. This means they have some capacity for redemption, on top of being memorable one-time foes. If only these poor guys had survived the Renaissance men. Then again, Grimm wanted to eradicate Puerto Rican people from the planet, so maybe it's for the best that he's gone. One of the newest villains, Mr. Landlord, is up next. He might honestly be the most hilariously over-the-top villain yet, and in Smiling Friends, that's really saying something. In A. Allen Adventure, he spends $750,000 and 8 months of planning on getting Alan to hang out with him. To smoke weed, drink diet soda, and play Burnout Revenge for the PS2 was all he wanted. Even crazier is the fact that he was willing to blow up the town if Alan didn't cooperate, which makes us wonder why he didn't just open with the bomb thing in the first place.
Yes, all me. The whole thing cost me $750,000 and over 8 months of planning just to lead you right here into the palm of my hands.
This guy was an absolute menace, but you can't help but feel kinda bad for him. He just wanted a friend. Terrorism isn't cool, but neither is being alone, you know? The main antagonist of Gwimbly's iconic adventure, the CEO, is up next. This absolute neckbeard of a man is a hilarious caricature of game developers who don't care about their fans. It's my IP to sit on and do nothing with. He's so unlikable that he somehow circles back around to being sort of endearing.
Do you want a chicken nugget?
I mean, the guy uses his literal last moments alive to dip a chicken nugget in his own blood and eat it. Hopefully Gwimbly's new Smash clone will fulfill the fans' longtime desire for a new game starring their favorite cream corn loving character. For now, we can rest assured that with the CEO gone, Gwimbly's free to do as he pleases. Truly one of the most heroic defeats of the series so far. From a heroic defeat to a bona fide hero, up next is Pilford, Crimeville's very own computer repair shop owner. This absolute legend might be built like Mr. Krabs, but he's nowhere near as greedy. He repairs electronics with his paper clips, a power that could easily be used for evil, especially in a place like Crimeville. But regardless, he chooses to run an honest business. And when Alan points out the obvious solution of using his nose instead, he's so overjoyed that he gives Alan all of his paper clips for free as thanks. Alan may have found this interaction annoying, but he couldn't disagree with him more. Landing just outside of the top 10 and at the top of our A tier is the legendary 3D Squelton. Don't say boohoo 3D Squelton. You've made it seriously high up on our list. What do we even need to say about this absolute icon? 3D Squelton is a simple little guy. He just wants to enjoy a life of playing with balloons and cosplaying Roger from American Dad. The frowning friends may have briefly led him astray, but 3D Squelton denounced their lies and proved himself to be an exceptional guy at the end of the day. And without further ado, we've reached the top. It's time to talk about the main ensemble cast and some of the supporting players who stole the show. This is the S tier. Now, guess who's kicking this category off? If you guessed DJ Spit, then get out of my head, man. DJ Spit is an absolute menace, but in a fun way. He'll do everything from stealing a box of paper clips and a freaking helicopter to threatening you at gunpoint if he even suspects you of messing with his head. The guy is legitimately insane, and he's one of those characters who only gets funnier the more you see him. Take his appearance in Allen Adventure, where he proceeds to buckle the box of paper clips into the helicopter, but not buckle up his own seat, even though he's driving. He also unloads on military aircraft with a machine gun, all the while insisting that he didn't do anything. On top of his chaotic personality, DJ Spit is used sparingly enough to where we won't be getting tired of him anytime soon. We can only hope he was one of those animatronics the landlord mentioned, because we really want to see more of this guy. Surely the landlord didn't outlive him too, right? One character who's definitely dead and gone, however, is Mip from the Enchanted Forest. Sure, maybe that's for the best, but while Mip is a total psychopath and a creep, he's also one of the most hilarious villains in the whole show. From poisoning Charlie for seemingly no reason at all to straight up seducing him the night before putting his plan into action, Mip is an absolute menace. The twist villain ending only makes this episode funnier to rewatch, especially his song that was basically tailor-made to screw with Charlie and Pim's friendship. Mip managed to become one of the most memorable characters despite only appearing one time.
Well, maybe I like that.
And seriously, that seduction scene is one of the best in the whole show. Who's that at number 8 on our list? It's Smormu, the 5th smiling friend. Sure, he had minimal screen time, but we'll never forget Smormu. His goofy voice, his epic dance moves, and the irreversible reality that he is, in fact, the 5th smiling friend will make him live on in our hearts forever.
Don't worry, Pim. I can cheer you up.
Truthfully, Smormu would have known that if he appeared for more than one episode, he'd completely overshadow the rest of the cast. It takes a truly selfish man to die for the sake of his friends, so thank you for your sacrifice, Smormu. It's because of you that we can see more of characters like Mr. Frog. Fun fact, originally Smiling Friends was actually going to be about Mr. Frog and his struggles with a life of fame. This ended up being scrapped, but Mr. Frog was not. He's a recurring character in the show with a hilarious 47-season show, at the end of which he always reminds the audience that he loves them. While he does love his audience, Mr. Frog does not love being a functional member of society.
Hello, but I'm not sorry.
He's a truly chaotic force, committing every crime imaginable with seemingly no rhyme or reason, and it makes for him being one of the most hilarious characters in the show. His goofy design and style of animation makes him even more entertaining, and we have to say our second favorite character outside of the main 5 Smiling Friends. As for our top pick in that category, we have Gwimbly. That'll be $5. We take Venmo. No? Okay, I guess we can say a little more about Gwimbly for free. From that goofy, nostalgic PS1 graphic energy he's got going on, to his struggle to regain control of his career, Gwimbly is equal parts hilarious and sympathetic. His desperation to make money by means of paid cameos and even emotes is proof of how in touch the crew behind Smiling Friends is. This is one of the most genuinely funny cartoons airing, and Gwimbly is a prime example of why.
But I can't do my iconic Gwimbly victory dance for only $5. I take Venmo.
No.
Every detail of this character is just tailor-made to be as unusual and funny as possible.
Okay, I guess just this once I can do it for nothing. Ew, ew, ew.
From asking for creamed corn right after nearly passing out to threatening to use his Gwimbly gun on the CEO for insulting him. We're definitely rooting for Gwimbly. And just like him, we dearly mourn the loss of Mr. Millipede. It takes a truly great character to speak out against the American fentanyl crisis.
Ew, ew, ew.
But now we've entered the top 5, and believe me when I say these 5 in particular were really difficult to rank. And I'm clarifying that because I don't want you all to crucify me for putting Glep in 5th place. Unlike the other characters who seem to have their own specific roles in the company, Glep is just a silly little guy who does whatever is needed of him. Whether it's working as a gardener for the boss's wife, dressing as Jared Fogle for a practical joke, or becoming the successor of Mr. Frog on his own show, Glep does it all, and he does it while speaking with such eloquence that even Boomhauer's poetic way with words pales in comparison.
That's great, man. That look like a damn apocalypse now, man. And I'm lying on the horror. The horror.
Being a jack of all trades who rarely takes attention away from the other characters makes Glep one of the most endearing characters in the show. And come on, just look at the guy. Look at the way he eats french fries. It's just impossible not to love Glep. And it's only gonna get tougher to put these guys in order from here on out. Next up is Alan, who I frankly wouldn't be hesitant to call my favorite character if you asked me point blank, which is something I could say about all of the S tier. All of the Smiling Friends characters have fun voices, but Alan stands out in that regard.
But let's go somewhere else. I don't think it's safe to talk here.
Why?
Because of the eyeball.
Because of the eyeball.
He sounds like a cross between Squidward and Cleveland Brown, if they were both hit with tranquilizers.
Here, please hit me as hard as you can.
Alan's cynicism is hilarious. He initially seems like a neurotic weirdo, obsessively counting paper clips and other office supplies, and being petty with rude employees, like that spider-armed asylum escapee. But what elevates Alan so high is just how surprisingly nice he is. You look at a character as cynical as Alan and assume he's gotta be a pretty abrasive guy. But while Alan is overly cautious and pessimistic, he's still generally nice to the people around him, even when he gets annoyed with them. Heck, he even tried to make peace with the Bliblies. He just wanted his cheese, man. Think of Alan as a more bizarre, less arrogant answer to Squidward from SpongeBob. He's grouchy, cynical, and sometimes insensitive, but he's a genuinely caring guy who works to help people. In 3rd place, we have the Bronze Medal of Greatness, but I totally forgot who it goes to. Can you help me out here, Mip? It's you, Charlie Dompler. Every series needs a straight man, and while we've seen a lot of not straight stuff regarding Charlie, he nonetheless fulfills that archetype perfectly.
No, I'm the one who's honored to be in the presence of such a hero.
He isn't as optimistic as Pim, but he also isn't as cynical as Alan. Charlie's just a chill guy trying to live his life in an honest, relaxed way. He's more than happy to work alongside his friends friends at the Smiling Friends company, making people smile however he can. Despite some occasional frustration, he's incredibly loyal to his friends and duties. In Mr. President, for example, he refuses to help the Secret Worm Society get Mr. Frog elected, not because he doesn't want to, but solely because he doesn't want to betray Pym. It would be easy to write Charlie as Pym's total antithesis, being grouchy and mean in opposition to his friendliness and optimism, but Charlie is just as nice of a guy as Pym is. He's just a bit more of a realist and is more easily overwhelmed by how bizarre the world's situations can get with him. Charlie is a good guy and a character the series truly wouldn't be complete without. You could make a strong case that he's the main character of the main characters, and someone the series really couldn't function without. But while it was insanely hard to choose between the two main characters, we have to give our silver medal of greatness to Pym Pymling. In a series full of cynicism, absurdism, and man-made horrors beyond our comprehension, Pym is the guy who ties it all together by being an absolute delight. First of all, just look at him. He's adorable, he's built like a little Muppet guy, and the fact that he doesn't have an official plushie or anything is honestly just criminal. What's so endearing about Pym is that he'll take on the most unusual, unlikely, frankly concerning of jobs with genuine optimism and care. Whether it's helping the incompetent President Jimble stay in office, or helping the forlorn Desmond find hope in the world, Pym is eternally sweet and caring. We made the same comparison in our good to evil ranking, but Pym is very similar to SpongeBob from the earlier seasons. He's kind, sensitive, and optimistic to a fault, but he's also more soft-spoken and conflict avoidant, making him a relatable character for those of us with that lovely blend of extroversion and social anxiety. He's not perfect either, though. As seen in the Enchanted Forest episode, when he becomes jealous of Charlie, he can go pretty far off the deep end. But this imperfection doesn't make Pym any less lovable. On the contrary, it cements him as the heart of the series, who really ties it all together. Every edgy, absurdist comedy needs a wholesome character to keep spirits up, kind of like Gurr from Invader Zim. That's Pym for Smiling Friends. But while the top spot was not easy to decide, we decided to give the gold medal to Mr. Boss. From his very first scene, breastfeeding his infant son, you know exactly what you're getting into with Mr. Boss as a character. And that is absolute chaos. Frankly, Mr. Boss just embodies the show in general. Never has such a genuinely well-intentioned guy looked and acted so freaking creepy, man.
Yep, guess I'm ugly goo.
One second he's tenderly feeding his infant son, and the next he's threatening to assassinate rival businesses or political candidates. One second he's giving out thoughtful gifts to his workers, and the next he's getting brainwashed by Satan's daughter. Mr. Boss is a true chaotic neutral character, in the sense that you never know what he's gonna do next. That's exactly what makes him the funniest character in an already hilarious show, though. Seriously, that Jared Fogle fake out was insane.
He goes, cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo.
But what cements Mr. Boss as our pick for the best character in the series? Simple. When you think of adult cartoon characters with similar chaotic energies, like Peter Griffin, Eric Cartman, or Roger Smith, you often think of them as a totally depraved, amoral character. Mr. Boss could have still been entertaining had he gone that route, but he takes the high road. While he's no less chaotic and unpredictable than those aforementioned characters, he stands out by being a genuinely caring, decent guy. Most of the time. He's genuinely nice to his employees, never raising his voice at them unless he's on the cusp of a mental breakdown, and even giving them thoughtful gifts like a patented Mr. Boss miniature. Seriously, Alan, how could you refuse such a thoughtful gift? Well, worry not. Knowing Mr. Boss, he'll be gifting us with plenty more unpredictably hilarious moments over the course of the series. You just know this guy is gonna steal the show whenever he comes up, and the best part is that he never outstays his welcome either. Not even in episodes that seem to center around him, like The Boss Finds Love, where after the opening scene, we don't see him act of his own volition until the tail end, where he just trolls Charlie and sings about how much he loves his workers.
As we make people smile all day, we get to play. We get to play.
This beautiful scene, it really just tells you everything you need to know. Mr. Boss is a legend, and we're crowning him the greatest character in all of Smiling Friends.